Urban Oasis Garden Center, the Virgin Gardener, is brought to you by Urban Oasis Garden Center. Gardening Coach, locally grown plants, nursery and gallery. Online at urbanoasisgardening.net.
It's a good question. Why aren't we all gardeners? Why aren't we all getting our food from the great outdoors? We eat processed foods, don't exercise enough, don't spend enough time outdoors, even just going for a walk. And then we wonder why we're not feeling good. What if, instead of spending hours staring at a screen, we went outside and played in the dirt? For the first time in my life, I'm gardening. Sure, it took some work. Got a little sweaty digging out the grass and weeds. Used some muscles that rarely get used putting on the compost, but it felt really good. Made me feel grateful that my body could do these things. Because one day, sooner than I think, I won't be able to.
Well, the next part would be deciding what to plant. So that's the fun part, or the hard part sometimes.
I used to use the excuse that I don't know how to garden, but there are so many people who do know how, and all you gotta do is ask. Horticulturist Sandra Scarrow of Urban Oasis Garden Center is my gardening coach.
Sometimes it's easier to start with what you don't like. You know, I don't want any of that. I will never eat that. You know, I'm not going to eat my Brussels sprouts, and so we won't plant that. One way to approach it that seems very backwards is, are you going to do any winter gardening?
Winter gardening? How awesome is that? We live on an island in the Pacific Ocean where we can garden all year round.
The only reason I ask that is because then you would need to, in your plan, make space to plant your winter veggies in about July, August. So you'd want to be able to harvest things and make room for them.
I'm going to pass on the winter garden for now. As a first-time gardener, I don't want to bite off more than I can chew.
It's best to start small. That's always a good idea. Then the next thing would be permanent things that are going to be there for years at a time or longer. Things like raspberries, blueberries, artichokes, rhubarb, that are going to want a semi-permanent or permanent bed. Do you want fruits like that?
Wow, so many choices. For my first garden, I'm happy with just the basics.
So some things I like to plant in single rows. Sometimes I like to plant other things in masses. Potatoes in rows, for instance. Corn would be in rows, squash and pumpkin.
Would all these things be planted at the same time? Would you plant some things earlier and some things later?
There's definitely things you can plant earlier. Peas you could even have planted now. Broad beans can be in the ground now. There's an increasing list of things that can be planted. And then other things I find might be easier for most people to plant from a transplant, like your tomatoes and your peppers and your really hot heat-loving things that you're going to plant quite late in the season. Around here, sometimes I find I wouldn't even put a tomato outside in June.
Really?
What do you have in mind for flowers?
Flowers? I have nothing in mind for flowers. I couldn't tell you lavender from a lilac. I thought a peony was the Vancouver exhibition, but I do love photography. And flowers have amazing color.
And some of maybe cutting flowers or butterfly or hummingbird flowers. So those would go into a permanent, semi-permanent border. And gardens change every year. So if it doesn't work one year or something's wildly successful, you know, you kind of go in that direction and not so much in the other.
Well, I might not know where I'm going, but I'm having a good time getting there. See you next time on The Virgin Gardener. It'll grow on you.
Urban Oasis Garden Center, the Virgin Gardener, is brought to you by Urban Oasis Garden Center. Gardening Coach, locally grown plants, nursery and gallery. Online at urbanoasisgardening.net.